There's a myth that pops up from time to time that tries to paint Christianity as this nice little club made up of weak-minded people. And, they're very polite. It's kind of a big do-gooders club, like a glorified Kiwanis club. It's a good way to improve your life, make you feel better about yourself, right? Well, you don't have to be a Christian for long to find out that Christianity is not that way at all. You get saved, and all of a sudden, you find yourself in a kind of war. You're struggling to keep your mind under control, your flesh under control, and you really want to please God, but you feel this resistance. Why is that? Why does it seem just so hard sometimes? Well, it's because you're in a war. There is a real devil who would love to rip your heart out. He hates you. It's not so much because of you. It's because of the Jesus inside of you. When he sees you, he sees Jesus looking back at him. And that just infuriates him, that God has united you together with Christ. That makes him so mad because he can no longer touch you. His power over you has been broken. And besides that, the Christ in you beat him up really bad at Calvary and paralyzed him from the neck down. And he hates Christ, and he hates the Christ in you because of that. So there's a war going on. And you see, if I forget that, it's really easy to start feeling sorry for myself. Man, things are hard and I'm struggling. Why is everything so hard? Just remember something. I'm in a war here. Of course, things are going to get hard sometimes. What else do you expect? And you see, the key is not to feel sorry for myself, but it's to rise up, put on the full armor of God, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, and to fight the good fight of faith. Because if I don't, the devil, that old tyrant sitting in a wheelchair, he is going to eat my lunch. And you've got to fight. You are in a war. And it's really important to remember that. Well, this is what we find in verses 12 to 23. And there are some powerful strategies for fighting the devil. And we're going to start right here in verse 12. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal bodies, that you should obey it in its lusts. Now, notice the wording here. It says, do not let sin reign. You don't let it. That means you have the power of a choice here. You can either let sin reign, or you can tell it to hit the road. Why is that? Well, it's just because of what we've been saying. Sin is a paralyzed tyrant sitting in a wheelchair. The only way that he can rule you is if you give him permission, you allow him to do it. And Paul's saying, don't give sin that privilege. Verse 13, and do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. What are these members that Paul's talking about here? These members are talking about our hands, our feet, our eyes, our mouth, our minds. They are weapons that we can offer up to God, or we can offer it up to the enemy. I can take these hands and I can help somebody across the street, for example. That is demonstrating love. Or I can take these hands and punch somebody in the nose, take their money or whatever. That's offering my members to sin. It furthers the kingdom of sin. It's like, let me help you spread your agenda of hate. Here you go, I offer myself up to you. And Paul's saying, hey, you're a soldier in God's army now. Don't use the weapons that you have, the members of your body, to further the enemy's plans. Don't do that. You're fighting for a different commander now. understand who you are, understand who you belong to. And now take your members and offer them to God. Present yourself to God. You know, almost every morning I pray some version of this. God, take my hands today and use them to do good and not evil. Take this voice of mine, take this life of mine, and use it to build up, to speak life, to build people up and not tear them down. I offer myself, I offer my members for good. Today, let me be who I am. I live in the Spirit. Today, let me walk in the Spirit. Verse 14, for sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. You see, we have moved out of sin's dominion. We have changed locations. We've moved out of his realm, out of his dominion, and he can no longer exercise dominion over us, even though he acts like it sometimes. There's a really great illustration of this in the book of Judges. It's a very colorful Old Testament story about Jael. That old domineering tyrant is in her tent, Sisera, who was the captain that used to dominate over her and her husband. And this is the captain who used to control them before they moved out of his dominion and went back down to Israel. Well, now he's back. And he comes into her tent and he says, hey, give me a little bit of water. I've been running for my life, and I want you to give me some water. And so she actually gives him some lukewarm milk, which is not exactly what you want when you've been running. But anyway, that seems to irritate him a little bit, and so now he's not so nice. And he begins to get demanding. And he starts commanding her like she's still in his dominion. And he says, hey, let me explain to you what you're about to do. If anybody comes and asks if I'm here, you just tell them no. In fact, why don't you take that hide that's over there and cover me up and hide me? And so that's what she did. She covered him up with this big old rug, this big old mantle. Well, while he was under that mantle, suffocating from the heat, still thirsty, she sneaks over to the edge of the tent while he's under that rug, and she grabs a big old spike. And there in Judges 4, it says that she went over to where he was, and it says that she put a spike to his head, and then she drove the nail with a hammer right through his head and fastened it to the ground. And then it says that, and there he died. And I always find that amusing. I guess he did die. Well, that's what you do when sin, the old man, is trying to control you. You're not in his dominion. What's he doing in your house? Take the spike, like taking the spike of Calvary, and you take the hammer of God's word and you nail that old tyrant to the floor. It's not programming. It's not philosophy. It's the cross. Sin shall not have dominion over you.